Stephen tilted his head. But how exactly do you fuse? MFS rolled her eyes playfully. It's really simple. You just gotta do some fancy dancing and stuff and boom! She slammed her hands together. You're fused. That's slightly true, Spinel told them. Her gem began to glow. The fancy dancing part is preparing themselves mentally to become one of your partner. Many gems have their own styles of dancing, such as Pearl's ballet, MFS's breakdancing, and my simple waltz. Pearl nodded in agreement. And we can demonstrate it right now. Stephen squealed happily while MFS blew a raspberry and muttered, show-offs. In the living room, Pearl performed a graceful style of dancing, and Spinel, holding her dress up, strutted towards her, and it began to make contact with Pearl and dip Spinel, enveloping them in light. Peach Moonstone reappeared and smiling gently to Stephen and MFS. What's going on? Asked Garnet as she walked in. Giving our Stephen a little lesson about fusion, replied Peach Moonstone. Garnet seemed to be brightened up. Why don't we all teach them? For the next hour, Garnet, Peach Moonstone, and all attempt to show Stephen how to fuse. They performed more dancing and even making MFS and Stephen dance. When she saw MFS grating her hips, Peach Moonstone face-palmed in disappointment with her lower hands. Garnet remarked the blank. Unfusing back to Pearl and Spinel, the two gems did their own little two dance moves to show the boy their gems are not glowing this time. Finally, all the gems made another attempt to unify themselves with Stephen. Snapping their fingers, putting their own foot down, and running towards right at the stage, and they leapt off and floated in midair. Stephen tried to join them. Man, you guys are so better than me, Stephen grumbled, wrapping a towel around his neck. Spinel stroked his back. It's your first time, sweetheart. We've done things like this before, like centuries. No one is ever going to get it the first try. Even Pearl and I struggled it for the first time when we formed Peach Moonstone. But Spinel, Pearl spoke, sounding worried. Stephen's half human. How do we know if he's capable of fusing? The four of us are made out of light, and he's organic. Organic? Stephen asked. Spinel rolled her eyes. So what? If he's not a gem, he can't do anything that a gem can do. Perhaps so, murmured Garnet. Yeah, it's Stephen. Who knows what's going to happen? MFS popped in, sighing. Stephen removed the towel and walked into his house. The gems watched him leave, Spinel having a gentle smile on her face. Don't worry, you guys, Spinel smiled. Stephen will find out in the best way possible. Pearl stared at her. That way? His way. Spinel continued to wash the rest of the dishes. Stephen had been gone for a while, but she knew that he needed time to himself. Hey, Spinel! A weird yet familiar voice made her pause as she turned around. A human looking familiar to the boy and his friend stood at the door, making a proud pose to her and with a big smile. What do y'all think? We're fused. Spinel dropped the teacup. You fused? Pearl asked while Spinel was cleaning up the remaining pieces of the broken teacup. Still recovering from the shock, MFS chuckled and Garnet kept clapping eagerly. This is unpredictable. Pearl began, inspecting the whole thing. A gem fusing together with another human being? It's impossible, or at least very inappropriate. Spinel now dumped the glass into the trash. Well, whoever's fusion is amazing what they are. She crossed her arms and stood beside Pearl and shot her a glare. That's right. MFS joined in. We gotta think of a name for ya, Stephen. Connie. Stevani? The newly aimed Stevani seemed to approve. Yeah, that works. Yeek! Spinel now hugged the fusion tightly and let out a scream of glee. You finally fused, my loves! However, Pearl wasn't exactly ecstatic as everyone else. Well, I'm glad you're all enjoying yourselves, but I think it's time you should unfuse. Oh, come on, Pearl, Spinel angrily retorted, uncoiling her arms directed to the body to the other gem. How come you always have to spoil Stephen's fun? He is learning something from this. You should be proud. Pearl was taken aback, but Garnet stood up, gently pushing MFS and Spinel away. Stevani. Garnet rested her hand on the humanoid's fusion cheeks, and the other gems backed away. Listen to me. You're not two people, and if you are not one person, you're experienced. Make sure you're a good experience. Now go and have fun. Connie, Spinel quickly added, Make sure you and Stephen get back home before 9. A few hours later, Spinel looked up at the clock. It was around 8:50 o'clock, and now she was getting worried. Finishing up the chores around the house, she was about to head outside and wait for the porch for Giovanni's return, but she stopped when Stephen rushed in. "Spinel!" he wailed, running up to her waist and started sobbing. Spinel immediately came down, concerned, and hugged him back. "Stephen, what's wrong, buddy?" The child looked up at him with her tear-filled eyes that could break someone's heart. "We went to a party, and Connie and I were dancing. We were having a ton of fun," he hiccuped when Spinel now wiped his tears. "Then this guy named Kevin tried to dance with us, but he was acting all weird, and I didn't like it." As he continued to cry, Spinel froze in her place, with her expression unreadable. "What did he do?" she asked quietly. Stephen sniffled and rubbed his back. He was standing so close to us, and he called us baby, and he..." The boy then stopped, and Spinel's grip on him tightened. Spinel just stood there, glaring straight ahead, mostly because of this picturing this Kevin seducing and touching her precious baby boy and his friend, who probably felt the same way he was feeling. "Stephen? What? Can you do me a favor?" "Like what?" "If this Kevin ever contacts you again, you'll be sure to let me know, and I'll teach him something that he'll never forget." Out on the beach, most of the beach city citizens have already gathered up for the fireworks. Garnet put on her cool dad jacket, Pearl put on her sweater, and Spinel wrapped the white shawl around her shoulders. "Like this?" Pearl asked Stephen. "Yeah, you guys are killing it," Stephen replied happily while handed him some pots and pans to them. "And here's some pots and pans. We're gonna have to make a lot of noise. Dad and I do this every year." "Well, in this case," Spinel prepared herself to slam the wooden spoon against her pot, but Stephen stopped her. "Not yet. We're doing it during the fireworks." "Oh," Spinel nodded, understanding. Stephen then looked around. "I bought some for Amethyst too. They should be here any second." "Yeah, they sure are taking a long time," Spinel spoke quietly to herself, sounding suspicious until her eyes widened and groaned. "Oh no, they couldn't be watching Lil Butler again." Pearl and Garnet stared at her, but then they were groaned in annoyance. Stephen turned to face her. What are you talking about?" Spinel stood up. "It's just some stupid show Greg and Amethyst used to watch. They disappear for days and they're not doing it again," she growled quietly to herself. "Again?" Stephen was confused. "You mean this isn't the first time?" Garnet scoffed and Pearl shrugged. "They've done this about a year ago, but they stopped." The fireworks then went off and the citizens around them cheered and applauded. Pearl then began to lightly tap on her pan on the wooden spoon. "Happy New Year, Stephen!" Stephen looked around, feeling a bit timid and hurt. Spinel didn't notice this and whispered, "Hey, sweetie, go ahead and stay with Pearl and Garnet. I'll go find Greg for you." Stephen then turned his head around. "What are you gonna do?" "I'm just gonna..." She paused and she gave Stephen a little, seemed to be like a fake, chat with him. She kissed his forehead and walked away, muttering something under her breath. "How is my volume?" Pearl asked. Pearl looked up at Garnet. Garnet stood up with her pots and pans. "That's low." She then changed it to loudly together, prompting everyone else around them to cover their ears. Spinel ignored the sound of the cheering and the fireworks and continued her way towards the garage. Her eyes narrowed and snarled. What kind of father would abandon his son at a time like this? The pink gems could even hear voice of her kid's father and the teammate aside, but couldn't make out what they were saying. They didn't sound too happy, though. Fists clenched, Spinel made her way through the pile of garbage and headed towards the light source, which had to be the television. Two shapes around appeared, but they were hard to make out. "Don't do this, MFS. I bet you stay with her." "You wouldn't..." "What? Do this?" Spinel stopped in her path and got her foot stuck, blocking out the sound of MFS shape-shifting and talking to Greg mockingly. She ignored Greg's pleading and stood up to remove her foot out of the garbage. And what's enough strength? Spinel pulled her foot right out of the couch and then shot herself up and glared at him. "Greg, Amethyst, you two have..." She stopped and her eyes widened in horror as she met her Rose's gazed up. Everything Spinel seems to suffer is very sight of her, tears beginning to spill. Amethyst shifted back, panicking. No, Spinel, it's not what you think." But Spinel stepped backwards, cupping her hand over her mouth and whimpered in horror. The thick of tears continued down her face, staring at the both of them. With a loud, heartbreaking sob, Spinel dashed out of the garage towards the beach house. Garnet, Pearl, and Stephen arrived back at the beach house, with the boy appearing more worried. When they stepped inside, they were shocked to see Greg sitting on the couch. MFS was banging on the door of the gems room. "Spinel, I'm sorry," she cried, slamming her fist on the door. "I didn't mean to. I was just messing around." Pearl walked up to her. Hey, what's going on?" "What happened?" Garnet questioned. Greg continued to sulk on the couch, unable to answer to the magenta gem. Stephen even stood there, his eyes shining with concern and confusion. "MFS, how could you be so callous?" Garnet angrily scolded, MFS cowering away from her. Stephen even leapt into the crying Greg's side, his father rubbing his back in contempt to console him. "You know how we all feel about Rose being dead." Pearl shared Garnet's fury, nearly crying. "And you know you have not clearly made Greg upset, but Spinel is upset as well." MFS refused to answer to them, summoning into her room and run inside. Greg sighed. "No, it's my fault." "No, it isn't. No," Pearl snapped back at the man. MFS should have been no more better than shapeshift into Rose. Of course, with that, Stephen looked up, his eyes filled with tears. "What's going to happen now?" Garnet readjusted her visors, her tone heavily with sorrow. "We must give both Spinel and MFS some space. It'll take a long time for them to speak to each other again." At the Big Donut, Lars and Sadie were all talking about the mysterious person that they had met last night, but stopped as Spinel walked in. Sadie prepared to greet her, until she and Lars made up with the full, dull eyes. Spinel approached the counter, not looking at one of them. "One of the usual, please." Sadie and Lars stared up a glance before Lars reached for the donuts and found the one she liked. The girl gave the gem a concerned look. "Hey, you look bummed out. Did something happen?" Spinel didn't move. Nothing happened." "Welp," Lars shrugged, handing her the paper bag. "Guess we don't need to worry then." Sadie angrily shoved Lars aside before continuing to smile comfortingly. "Ignore him. We promise whatever's troubling you, it's not going to last forever." Still silent, Spinel took the bag and placed the money around the counter and left, leaving the two employees stare at one another in confusion at the sight of their concern from Lars. Sitting out on the couch, Spinel took her donut out of the bag and stared at it. After a moment, she took a bite out of it and then through her nose. She revealed to make the big flavor of the icing. "Spinel!" Spinel's eyes shifted up, meeting the boy's gaze. Stephen was making the big smile he could ever muster, although it wasn't exactly an honest smile. Swallowing her donut, Spinel blinked at him. "What is it?" The boy handed her something in his hands, a card. "Someone who is really sorry wanted to give you this." Spinel looked at the card and opened it. It crudely drawn a picture of herself and Amethyst surrounded by flowers. Stephen expected to cheer her up and possibly forgive Amethyst, but this smile faded into a horrific frown as Spinel shredded the card into two halves and dropped the pieces. "How nice of her," she deadpanned. "If only she had enough maturity to say sorry to my face." Stephen Finn stared at her in disbelief and hung his head. "Spinel, it's been a while. Amethyst really does feel bad for you of what she did. She knows what she did was wrong, and if my dad can forgive her, you can forgive her too." Spinel didn't reply, exhaling his breath. Stephen walked away and leaving her alone. "Are you sure these will work?" Amethyst asked with a suspicious eyebrow, holding a bundle of white pupils. Stephen nodded. "Yes, Spinel really likes flowers. I kinda don't know why, but I don't judge." Amethyst's body seems to droop. I don't think I can do it. Spinel's known Rose longer than I have. She, Pearl, and Garnet had to go way back. She choked on her forming tears, and of course Stephen's lip began trembling, but he sighed. "But Amethyst, you should apologize. You're the one who..." His world was where he trailed off, not knowing that what else he has to say to him, or he'll make things worse at this point. Just then, they saw Spinel walk towards the front door and stopped at their gazes. Both Stephen and Spinel and Amethyst tried to give her a kind smile, but they were met with Spinel's icy cold glare, mainly at the purple gem as she continued her way to warp pad, and she teleported away. Amethyst groaned miserably. "Great, she'll be gone for hours." Stephen patted her shoulder in consolation. "Hey, we'll at least that will give you the time to find your words, right?" That night, Spinel was sitting on the beach, and her spiky pigtails were dancing in the wind. Her eyes were closed and she was taking slow breaths. Hey, Spinel was jolted out of her peace when she looked up to see the purple gem scowling. She turned away, however, she didn't move when Amethyst sat beside her, still holding one of the white tulips. Far from away from the balcony, Stephen and Pearl and even Garnet watched for them, looking hopefully. After a few seconds, Amethyst spoke up. Spinel, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. No response. But Amethyst wasn't going to give up that quickly. I mean it. I was mad at Greg for a stupid reason. I didn't want him to leave, so forming into his dead wife isn't going to make him stay. You're scaring him. Amethyst stuttered under Spinel's harsh whisper and continued, I know, and I'm sorry. Then handed Spinel a white tulip. Stephen held under his breath. Pearl continued to stare, and Garnet remained blank. Spinel stared at the flower and actually looked at it and inhaled it. Amethyst? The purple gem perked up slightly. Yeah? Spinel's eyes shifted into air. Promise me you'll never shapeshift into Rose ever again. For Greg's sake and mine. Oh, Spinel. Oh. Amethyst breathed and nodded, looking straight at her eyes. I promise. Miss Stephen, Pearl, and Garnet all nodded to each other, and they all went back inside, leaving the two alone for the night. You know, the stars are prettier than from far away, Amethyst commented. Spinel's lips formed into a smile. A small one at that. Definitely, she said.